Hey, just before we start the show, I just want to let you know we've got a new feature here that allows you to leave us a recorded message. I know sometimes there are things we're going to say on the show that you take issue with, that you agree with, we've missed the point, whatever it might be. So it's simple. Just go to the show notes and you'll find a link there that allows you just hit the record button, have your say, and it'll land in our inbox. And we'll probably include it in upcoming shows. So thanks for doing that. Now here's the show.
An original
from Story Studio Network.
Well, look at that. Here we go. It is the 5th day of December. Welcome in. Now and next, Dave Trafford here for Story Studio Network. Yeah, I know you were thinking, where were you last week? Well, we were busy. And busy enough that we just put a pause on all of the podcasting that we do out of this studio. So we just hit pause on Now and Next and On the Ledge. And that's because we had a series of team meetings that were going on, and they were in Halifax, and it was rather invigorating, I have to say. Got the team together to look ahead to 2024 and where we want to go and how we want to keep, evolving what we're doing. That's really what it's all about, And as much and all as, you're a regular listener to podcasts, it's amazing to me how many people are still discovering that. And that includes individuals as listeners, and then a lot of the folks who are brands and the organizations that we work with, right? And it's a pretty diverse group. Anyway, we really took time to do deep dives into where we want to go and how we want to push this rock up the hill, and do so in a way that creates, content that not only captures your attention, but it's the stuff that's out there that kind of makes a difference. It makes you make a difference. Yeah. So there's lots of shows that we do. We do the 2030 Project with the Daily Bread Food Bank. We've done a great series with the RCAF Foundation on celebrating the aviation history here in Canada. RCAF is going to come up on its 100th anniversary in April of this year. So there'll be lots to talk about there. We've also done, I think, important work with Forestry for the Future. Talking about the role that forestry, and specifically the industry here in Canada, and the role it plays in the climate change conversation. And quite frankly, government is not really paying enough attention to the role of forestry and the effects of the forestry management. I posted on LinkedIn today that I did an interview with Jamie Stephen, and he is an expert in bioenergy and, kind of making this transition from fossil fuel based economy to one that is more sustainable, cleaner, and so on. Interviewed him last week for a new show we're working on. And I was a bit gobsmacked, and I like to think I'm paying attention. I was a bit gobsmacked to learn that the forest fires that we had in 2023 kicked out 3 times the amount of carbon emission that were spewed from fossil fuels. 3 times. And here's what's even more disturbing. Our federal government does not include those emissions in the official tally of carbon. That's crazy. Anyway, really cool conversation with him. I'll tell you more about it as we get closer to releasing the series and the details of it. But I will just tease you and tell you, we have technology in this country that would not only allow us to use biofuels to reduce the carbon emissions from generating electricity or whatever else it might be. We can use biofuels to generate power and actually take the emissions from those biofuels as we burn them, because it's a wood product, capture the emission, and then bury it underground. And it stays there. No emissions into the atmosphere. None. And by doing that, and because you're using a renewable resource, as in a tree, and by its nature, that tree is capturing carbon as it grows. So it's taking carbon out of the atmosphere. And we're using it then to generate energy and capturing that carbon and storing it underground, i.e. not putting it out into the atmosphere. It actually reverses the effect of climate change. Yeah, we have the technology to do that in this country. And the best place to do it is in Western Canada. Yes, where we have the oil patch. It's a really cool story. So my point is, like to think I'm paying attention, and I saw this on LinkedIn, so I posted it again. And this is the kind of stuff that we're working on. So a couple of weeks ago, I sat down and interviewed Julia Deans on this show. Julia is the president and CEO at Habitat for Humanity Canada. And we were talking about, Rosalind Carter's passing and so on, and then kind of got into where Habitat fits in that spectrum of housing and the housing emergency and all sorts of things. So I would encourage you, I'll put it in the show notes. But if you're already here, just flip back a couple and listen to that interview, because it's important in terms of the conversation that we're having. But a few days later, I saw on LinkedIn, Julia has announced some personal news. She's ready for a professional adventure to move away from the Habitat office. So she's stepping down as of June the 30th, 2024. And of course, there will be a search to go on to try and fill those shoes. But what was interesting to me is that through her tenure, and most of it was during COVID, what came out of COVID was this whole sense of, we all have to innovate. How do we deal with a crisis in the middle of a larger crisis? And housing was only exacerbated. So during her tenure, you saw Habitat evolve. Really interesting way it evolved in terms of the model that it uses. It's gotten into more multi-unit buildings, right? And they have taken it to the next step. So where you already have a fairly, innovative organization, to be able to innovate further is pretty important. And so anyway, I would advise you put an ear on that episode of Now and Next with Julia, and it came out right after the the fall economic statement from the feds, and where there was next to no comment about what's going on in the housing sector, and didn't address much of the affordability around it. Yeah, there was a few points, but really nothing there. So it's people like Julia and the folks who work in, nonprofit areas like Habitat. And then the private sector, is who they work with a lot. And the government steps in and gets regulations done or gets them in the way or whatever it might be. But how do you incentivize, the builds to make sure that they work? So it's an important conversation. Go back, listen to that piece with Julia. But what I wanted to do, here we were, and I was going through my files 5 years ago. I worked on a show with the folks at Habitat for Humanity. Mark Rogers was the president CEO at the time. And we sat down and we did a 10-part series, and it was all about the giving season. The show started with the Canadian Thanksgiving, roughly ended with the U.S. Thanksgiving. And of course, the Tuesday after the U.S. Thanksgiving is Giving Tuesday, which was about a week ago. And so I'm going through my archives, and I realized, there was just one extraordinary story that we told. If you want to really learn and understand how Habitat works and the effect that it has, on the individuals who become homeowners. That's one thing. But there are also people who put up their time, their energy, their volunteer, whether they're donating, whatever it happens to be, that in fact, Giving Tuesday wasn't just about making a donation. This episode that we're going to feature ran back in late November 2018. And it features a donor, so to speak, a volunteer, and a new homeowner. You want an example of how and why Habitat works? Put an ear on this. In this episode, we will meet a volunteer who has been giving his time, his expertise, and his own personal brand to Habitat Canada for more than 15 years. But first, we meet homeowner Karen, who was able to move her family out of an area of Toronto rife with gun violence and high crime to a safe, accepting neighborhood in the city.
I just got tired of living there, tired of not moving anywhere. I just felt like I was stuck. And I needed change for me and my children. So that's when I decided I'm going to try to go for this and try to start the application process, which it was a lengthy process, but it was so worth it.
How old are your kids?
Well, now my daughter's 23. My son's 18. I have a 8-year-old and a 4-year-old. Well, she'll be 5. Yeah.
So all of your kids at one point lived at Lawrence Heights with you?
Well, the three of them did.
Not the youngest?
Not the youngest.
Okay. What was the impact on the 3 elders then, and when they were in that neighborhood?
That neighborhood, well, for my daughter, she didn't really go anywhere. She didn't go outside. She wasn't comfortable going outside at all. For my son, he always wanted to be outside. He's very active. He liked playing outside, hanging outside, but it's just that you have to be so careful with them going outside. So he wasn't allowed to go certain places. Lawrence Heights is a big neighborhood, so he wasn't allowed to leave our immediate area ever without supervision because of the way the neighborhood was.
And what was their own view of those restrictions? I mean, did they have a sense of the problems in the neighborhood?
Oh, they understood completely. My son would be outside sometimes playing in the broad daylight, and they would drive by shooting. I literally had to teach them that you have to duck every time you hear those sounds coming at you.
So that's not the normal parental handbook advice.
Of course, never. It's not. I mean, at the age of 5, your kids should not know what gunshots sound like close up.
Did they talk to you about that?
Yeah, they still talk about the neighborhood. My son, he's grateful and thankful that we're out of the neighborhood now. And he totally understands. At first, it was kind of difficult for him when we moved, because everyone he knew was in that neighborhood. Yeah. So, but now he's grateful and thankful that we live in an area where he can go in and come out freely without having to be worried at all.
So you are figuratively at the end of your tether here with the neighborhood. You're worried about your kids. You find the Habitat brochure. It's a little outdated as far as you know. So you call the office, and how long did it actually take? I know you said it took a long time to go through the process. Do you have a sense of how long that was by the time you called to the time you finished your application?
No, from the time I called, I had to go to an information session, which probably took within a week. And then the application process itself, gathering all the information that I needed to gather to provide to Habitat, took maybe about a month or two. From there. And then there was a home visit where they came to my home to visit. And then it kind of went from there. Yeah. And
then after that, you would have gone through all the process to make sure that you were in a position where you could pay the mortgage and all of those sorts of things, right?
Right. All the information was verified. We did police checks and all of that. Background checks, I guess you would call it.
So go ahead now. At what point did somebody, what did they contact you by email? Did they knock on the door and say, guess what? We got you a house? How did that work?
No, they contacted me by phone to let me know that they were going to come to my home to let me know what the application process, like whether or not I was approved or not. So they actually came to my home because I'm pretty sure I remember jumping up and down that day.
So you were pretty sure it was going to be good news.
I didn't know what to expect, but I'm assuming if they're coming to your home, it's pretty good news.
And when they finally said, guess what, we've approved your application.
Oh my gosh.
Do you remember what happened?
I know I jumped up hugging her. I don't remember her name now, but she's no longer with Habitat, but it was Lauren, I think. I remember hugging her and just tears still come out of my eyes today. That was like, other than having my children, of course, but that was like one of the happiest days of my life when she told me I was going to get out of that neighborhood. It's still emotional. It's still raw after all these years, but I was so grateful. So I just felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulder that day. So we were all happy. Of course, my kids then didn't really, I would be honest, they probably didn't care. They didn't really understand it. But for me, it was a big deal.
It's clear it was a big deal. It's still a big deal.
It's still a big deal.
So once we got over the hugging, at what point did you find out, okay, this is where the house is going to be, this is the process, here's the timeline?
After that, we had to go to information sessions. So once you're approved, then you start going to information sessions. We didn't find out exactly where it was going to be built that time, but we knew there was a waiting list and you would have to wait for some time.
So the wait was killing you?
Well, at first it wasn't that bad. What happened was once we were waiting, I think Habitat didn't have any areas selected at the time. So there was quite a few people on the waiting list, and normally it would take, I think, 18 months for your home to be built, 18 months to 2 years. And it was longer than that. So we didn't find out right away. I believe when we did find out, I found out by mail where my neighborhood was going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And when you moved in, how long did it take for you to notice a difference in the effect on your kids' lives, on your own kind of routine around the house?
I want to say the first couple of months was difficult, just trying to change everything, schooling, daycare, where I work, going to and fro. But I would have to say maybe within 6 months to a year, I would say even for my son, things immediately changed because he started bringing people to our home, which is something he never did before, right?
So these were new friends in the new neighborhood?
New friends from his school and his neighborhood, the neighborhood.
Have you seen a change in your kids just in terms of that change? Oh,
definitely.
What's changed?
They're more confident. My son's happier. He's working part-time now. He's going to school. He's finishing up school. He wants to be a paramedic, which is something that I didn't even know he was even interested in before. So I just see the work ethic now. He knows he has to work hard to get where he needs to be. So I see that change in him. My children can play outside with no problem. The young ones, they're always outside playing around. They're much happier not being stuck in a small apartment. So it's a big change for our family. I mean,
were the kids involved in the sort of the sweat equity that you had to include in
the older kids were involved.
And how were they involved on site, or were they involved?
Yeah, my daughter and son were on site. My son, he helped at the restore. They both helped at the restore a lot with the volunteer hours, especially on the weekends when we were off.
So he got a full experience of the Habitat.
Yeah, he did.
Offering. Oh,
yes,
that's good.
He did. Yeah.
Well, so how long have you been in the house now?
2 years.
2 years.
2 years.
And the world is different.
It's different. Totally different. Much happier. We're much more confident. I am, at least. So it's been great. It's been good.
Well, thanks for sharing your story.
Thank you.
Scott McGillivray is the host of HGTV's Income Property and Moving the McGillivrays. He gives his time, he gives his expertise, and his own personal brand to Habitat Canada and he's been doing it now for more than 15 years.
There's a million different things you can donate your money or your time to, but the question is, are you making a significant impact, right? I think that becomes an important question people should ask themselves, because I look at all the different things that I can do and all the different things that people ask of me as well, and for me, I've balanced my ability to give back as well as my ability to build a career and a brand and all these things. And I know I have seen the direct impact that my help with Habitat has made. And I'll be honest, when I started working with Habitat over 15 years ago, would have been my first experience with Habitat. It was just sort of another day trying something different. I had volunteered for a lot of different causes. And at the time I was doing rental properties, and one of my real estate agents said, "Hey, we're doing this Habitat fundraiser. Would you be interested in coming and being at our table and going to the auction and stuff?" And I was kind of like, okay, sure.
So you didn't know much about it?
I really did. I had heard the name, but I honestly thought it was somehow people were just given a house, right?
Yeah.
And I think people think
that's a general misconception.
It is a misconception. And I went to the event, and I listened to sort of the local authorities from Habitat, and I had been to the Restore. I had been to the Restore many times to purchase things and drop things off as a young landlord, always doing renovations. And I got to know some people. They talked to me. They learned that I was doing a lot of real estate investing in the area, and that I was a contractor. And there was a woman's build going on in Guelph, actually, at the time. And they had asked if I would come and work on the woman's build, which I'm hoping they didn't think I was a woman. I'm hoping that they were just thinking,
they figured you would have attracted more women. That's what they thought. Come on.
But I had a lot of fun. It was my first time volunteering on a site, and I actually met somebody there who really described it well to me. And the house that we were building, it was for a family who had been struggling, who had a series of unfortunate events, but still had to qualify for financing and pay for this thing. I was just sort of mind blown. I'm like, wait a second, we're not just handing these things away. This is it's a bit of a hybrid to me. Like Habitat, there's definitely a charitable side to it, but it more what I find myself more aligned with is that it motivates people to have a better life. And it gives them an opportunity where otherwise there wouldn't be an opportunity for a better life. And I think that's what's really important about Habitat for people to recognize is there's no handouts here. This isn't a freebie. This isn't just, I put my name in a lottery and, get something for doing nothing. This is more of, listen, we know that hard times fall on people for circumstances that they can't necessarily control. We're going to give an opportunity for those who are willing to dig themselves out and work themselves out of those situations. We're going to give you an opportunity to do that, and that's what I think the whole concept of Habitat is a hand up, not a hand out, makes such a big difference. And when we film that PSA, I'm like, we need to get that message out there that this is one of those opportunities for people to get involved with something that helps people who want to help themselves. Right? It's not just a freebie, because there's a lot of programs out there that I think get abused, to be honest, and it frustrates me to see things go to waste. Whereas with Habitat, there's no waste at all. It's a self-fulfilling program that basically finds the best people in the worst situations and gives them an opportunity for a better life.
So let me ask you, you went into that with a certain level of expertise and skill and the things that you bring to that build. What did you learn when you were on the site?
Well, the first time I was on the site, I learned that they need as much help as they can get. There's a lot of people volunteering time, and people definitely have fun on the sites. And I wouldn't discourage anybody from getting the experience of being on a Habitat build site. But it's expensive to build a house, and you want a house that's built well. You want the quality and the value to be there. And I learned that, there's a huge opportunity for us to give back to our communities in a way that's going to give back to us as well. And that's where I talked about, for every Habitat family that moves into a neighborhood, it's like there's more than what was put in given back to that community in the long term. So I think that's pretty important. And over the years, being able to get involved at different levels. First year, I went to a charity auction, and then I went and worked on a site, and then I got involved with the Restore, and then I got involved with emceeing events. Then I did public speaking engagements. Then I started giving larger sums of time and money to the organization. And working with Karen actually a couple of years ago was a big turning point as well, because I had been heavy on the giving side, I guess you could say, as being involved, but I had never seen the actual receiving of a home with a family, because it's not, that's not what you do as a volunteer necessarily. And so when we did the show and the network was like, well, what are you doing with the community? I said, well, I'm doing Habitat stuff. And we were able to include that as part of a show, which was excellent. And then Habitat was generous enough to allow us to film the experience.
And the Habitat experience that Scott and the HGTV crew shared was homeowner Karen's.
I've been volunteering with Habitat for years, but this time it's going to be a little different. We're going to be working with a well-deserving family, and they have no idea that we're involved with their build. And even more exciting, they have no idea that I'm about to show up at their door.
Hi, good morning.
I couldn't believe Scott McGillivray was at my door.
You had no idea this was going to happen.
I didn't have any idea it was going to happen, but I watch HGTV so much that I knew exactly
turned up the
who
TV.
he was. Yeah, I knew exactly who he was. So
what brought you to that particular project, Scott?
Well, we were working with Habitat in Toronto. I was doing work with them, and I said, I want to meet one of the families on the build site that we're doing. Mm-hmm. And at first they were a little bit, it's a little bit hesitant. They're like, what's going on? There's a TV show. This is out of control. But they said, okay, well, let us talk to some of the families and see if they're open to filming, part of the experience. And I guess my director had actually spoken to a few of the families, and he said, listen, he's like, we've got this woman, her story is phenomenal, and I think that you guys would be a great fit in terms of working. And I worked on all the properties, but I got to work directly with Karen and her family as well. And literally from the minute we opened the door, I was like, this is like a match made in heaven, because we have kids around the same age. First of all, her two youngest are the same age as my two kids, and I got to sort of see where she was living, and we even walked around in the old neighborhood, and I just said, I really want to get inside your experience and understand from beginning to end how this is changing your life. And she did that. She showed me the experience, and it motivated me even more, which, I'm the type of person, I don't like to do anything kind of halfway. I like to do things all or none. And I think the missing link for me at the time was I had been involved with Habitat, and I had gotten to do all kinds of great things, but I never saw the full story until I met Karen to see where she was coming from, and then by the time we were done, to see where she ended up. And I think that that just changed me forever.
So it's interesting to me that when I asked you what you learned on the site, you learned some of the technical stuff and the basics and the nature of the organization itself. It wasn't until you actually met Karen that you come to a full appreciation of what Habitat does.
Yeah, because through no fault of her own, she had been in a situation where we cherish nothing more than our children, and it doesn't take much more than being a parent to understand that. And to meet her kids and to meet her and to understand the situation she was in, I think I empathized at the moment. I'm like, oh my gosh, if this was me, what would I do? I would would do what Karen is doing, and I'd work my butt off to make a difference in my life. And I would hope that there was an answer out there that would allow my energy to translate into a better experience in my life. And I think I sat there and cried with you in your living room when I found out your situation, and such a beautiful family, wonderful children. I got to spend time with your kids, especially Jaden, who, it was an interesting time in his life because he,
is he the eldest?
No.
Okay, how old is he?
He's 18.
18.
Right
Okay, right.
But he wasn't able to work.
He
wasn't able to work on the job site because he was too young.
Right.
But while we were working on the job site, he had his birthday.
Yes.
And so we got to go to him being able to come to the job site and wanting to learn a few things. And I actually had him over to my house secretly. I invited him over to my house and said, I'm going to teach you how to build some stuff before you get to the job site. And we built a table for his mom. And
where's the table?
It's still in the kitchen.
Very good.
And he still reminds me every day that he built that table. He still reminds me that he did that. So that was very important for
and it's
him.
an experience he wouldn't have had if you hadn't hadn't evolved through Habitat.
Exactly.
And it sounds like a small thing, but when he's got his own kids, at some point that table's still going to be there, and he's going to be able to say, "This is what I did, and I learned."
About
right?
He talks about
Seriously.
all the time. He still talks about it. I mean, I think the experience was really important for him because with Jaden was my main reason. Like, I don't mean all my children weren't, but he's my only son, for one. And living in that type of neighborhood that we lived in, you usually are a product of your environment. Mm-hmm. So the most important thing for me was to get him out of that neighborhood while he hits that critical age where gangs and gun violence and all of that is trying to suck him in. So that was what was so important for me. And that's he's the biggest change person.
So Scott put power tools in his hand as opposed to... No, seriously. I mean, they can't underestimate the value of that, right? As opposed to a gun.
Yeah, it's just like how they always say it takes a village to raise a child. And I'm still grateful and so thankful to you, Scott, because he learned a lot. He has that experience of a male figure to teach him something, right? So he's very confident about that. Anyone that comes to our home, he tells them, I built this table.
Right on.
And my little one would be like, no, Scott did it. And no, I did it by myself, right? So he was really excited about it, and he still talks about it till this day. So that was a great experience for him.
Yeah, see, that's not a box that you had anticipated ticking, I don't think.
Honestly, I didn't know what to expect. I thought I was just going to meet a family, and then I'd be there when, we turn the keys over. But it was impossible not to be invested when you're in that situation. I mean, whether I was working with Habitat or not, once I had met Karen and her family, I just knew that, this is just what you do as people, is you help other people when they need it. And look, we've all been in tough situations, some tougher than others, I'll admit, right? But I've had my tough days, and who knows what the future holds. So do well while you can, and hope that when you need it, someone will do well upon you. So, I think about Karen and her family all the time. I follow her on Instagram. I'm always watching to see if the kids show up on one of her posts, and I'm thinking, what is happening in Karen's life? But it looks like a lot of fun, and look like you guys are having a great experience.
Yeah, it's really good. I actually got into network marketing because of Scott.
Wow.
Yeah. It's for weight loss, though.
Not competition.
And I've just started, so it's interesting. I'm helping other people and trying to explain to them how to lose weight and challenge groups
and how to feel better about themselves.
Yeah, how to
for
feel
sure.
better about themselves, especially single mothers that. It's just trying to find a balance between home life, work life, and then taking care of yourself, because you have to take care of the children. So you have to be your best self, right? So it's just trying to encourage people to take care of themselves and their body and be healthy. So thank you, Scott.
Yeah, hey, sure. That's good. I love it.
So yeah, that's where I'm at now.
Well, the nice thing about this is that you're both great storytellers, and you have even better stories to tell. So thanks for sharing them with us. This has been great.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So for more information on that, I would encourage you to go to the Habitat for Humanity Canada website. and check it out. And all the podcasts are all there, and it's fairly evergreen stuff. But I just thought that example of giving and receiving with Scott and Karen in the story, it goes a long way to making a huge difference in a lot of people's lives, as you heard. All right, that'll do it for us for this 5th day of December. Dave Trafford here. It is Now and Next for Story Studio Network. You can find me on all the social media platforms at Dave Trafford if you want to reach out. Got a comment? You can also make sure that you drop us a line through hello at Story Studio Network. And just a reminder, if you want to leave a comment, record your comment and have us play it back in the show. You've got something to say about the show, we will include it. So you can find that link in the show notes. Just hit the record button, leave us your message, and we'll include it. All right, that'll do it for us. We'll be back tomorrow right here on Now and Next for Story Studio Network.
This is SSN.
Story Studio Network.